This is Radio Ukraine International with the weekly program Doing Business, hosted by Rodion Zhiznyevsky and produced by Konstantin Lavrentyuk. Doing Business covers current economic developments in and concerning Ukraine and gives topical information as well as immediate and longer-term economic forecasts. It is what we think might give you food for thought and help you see Ukraine through the economic angle. And here is the second part of the program about the second day of the Yalta European Strategy YES Brainstorming. Yalta European Strategy YES is a leading forum for discussing Ukraine's European future and global context. YES fosters new ideas, connects Ukraine to international partners, supports forces for change in the country, and builds networks of supporters for a new Ukraine worldwide. For over 15 years, YES has initiated dialogue between leaders from Ukraine, the EU, the US, the Russian Federation, and beyond. Within Ukraine, it provides a platform for the government and opposition. It brings together leaders from politics, business, media, civil society, and the expert community. The Yalta European Strategy YES, in partnership with the Viktor Pinchuk Foundation, holds a new format event, YES Brainstorming, which focuses on post-COVID steps to survival. A new format discussion, YES Brainstorming, is an exclusive interactive conversation from Ukraine's most promising leaders of today and tomorrow, with some of the world's most acclaimed thinkers. The new brainstorming format has been designed to offer more interactivity with participants, encourage to ask questions and start a dialogue, allowing for a more intense and less formal conversation that is open, substantial, and fascinating. The agenda focused on global risks, such as climate change, future pandemics, and the potential fallout from technical disruptions, as well as challenges for the international order and how to overcome such threats and leverage the opportunities available to the humankind. The second day of lively and enlightening debates at the YES Brainstorming event was concluded as high-level European and Ukrainian leaders and experts, including former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, gathered to discuss Ukraine's contribution to the global economy, the Kremlin's view of Ukraine, the aftermath of 9/11, and what it means for tomorrow, and how a new Cold War will not save a warming planet. The fifth session, chaired by Julian Tett, US editor-at-large at the Financial Times, and David Rubenstein, discussed the global economy and how Ukraine can contribute. The pair were joined by Vladyslav Rashkovan, Alternative Executive Director at the International Monetary Fund, Olena Bilan, Chief Economist at Dragon Capital, and Taras Kachka, Deputy Minister of Economy, Trade Representative of Ukraine, who debated the current state of the Ukrainian economy and what the country should do in order to encourage foreign investment.
So perhaps I can start with you, Vladyslav. Ask you first of all, how do you evaluate from the perspective of the IMF, and I understand that the IMF is about to engage in more discussions with Ukraine, how do you evaluate the state of Ukraine's economy right now?
We went through the crisis not badly. I would say better than many other economies in the world and many other economies in Europe. And you may start thinking how it comes. And clearly there were few elements, few factors which affected that. One of them is Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian Minister of Finance had enough, I would say, fiscal space, to accommodate the additional expenditures to finance the health system and, to finance the economy during the lockdown, to support, the households during this period. And this was done, because there was some job done before by the ministers of finance. We have Natalka here, we have Oksana Markarova, we have Sasha Danylyuk, who did something, and now we have Sergei Marchenko, who did a lot of efforts in the previous years, I would say after 2016, to reduce the budget deficit in the economy, to reduce the debt in the economy, and therefore it allowed to accommodate these costs, the additional expenditures in the budget without a big problem. So this is the first thing. The second thing, which has been done before, is fixing the problems in the banking sector, and this is we discussed now at the anti-oligarchic forum, the panel, but the banking sector will go through this crisis now, first time ever, when the banking sector was not requesting money from the state to be recapitalized or to support the depositors of the banks because the banks bankrupted. Instead, the banking sector was financing the economy, both private business and also the government, increasing the investment in the treasury bills and therefore supporting the government in order to deal with this with the economy. And I would say the third element which helped to go through the crisis not badly was the lockdown, in fact, that it was adaptive, if I use this word. So people adapted to the lockdown, which was not so much, very much strict. Therefore, today's situation in the economy is not bad, but the question is what next? How you need to grow. Because the idea of the IMF program is, it's really written in the objective of the program, is that Ukraine need to have to catch up the peers, and therefore for this we need to have a higher growth than Poland or Hungary or Turkey. And that the global economy will grow like maybe 6+% this year, and if we go 4%, it means that we are deviate, so we are divergent from the growth of the global economy. And here, the IMF is happy to support the country to develop the policies to address these issues. And the current program, which we have, the standby arrangement, is actually focused on that, to help to keep the macro stability in the country and to prepare for the next round of the structural reforms when the window of opportunities will be. Coming back to the status of the program, we recently had, 3 weeks ago, we had a call between the managing director of IMF and the president. The call went, I would say, fantastic, quoting one person on this call. There is a clear, commitments from both sides, and both sides currently meet those commitments. And therefore, I really expect that in course of next 10 days, 12 days, we probably may start the mission, review mission, which also should lead to the, hopefully to reaching the staff level agreement and to some extension of the program to accommodate the future tranches.
So thank you. Olena, would you agree that Ukrainian economy is kind of doing not bad? And what do you see as the major hurdles for it to catch up with some of the other more vibrant economies in the region at the moment?
Actually, it's very difficult to disagree with Vlad. I analyze Ukraine's economy for almost 20 years now, and my personal assessment that it's currently in a very good shape, actually. I would even describe it not as not bad, but as a good. And I genuinely believe that now Ukraine's credit rating is not reflecting the strengths of the economy already. We're still kind of a B country. The current credit ratings are lower than our historical highs, so we really deserve an upgrade. But the fundamental issue is, I again agree with Vladyslav, is about the future growth and the sources of this growth. Because Ukraine's demographic trends are not supportive to growth. We have a shrinking and aging population. And we do have to invest in the country. Ukraine is underinvested in economy. So the ratio of investment to GDP is only 15%. This is a very low ratio. And I think that the problems for foreign investors are well known and has been discussed in this country for so many years that I will not tell you anything new. And we discussed it on previous panel. This is a rule of law. This is a fundamental problem. Our company, together with the European Business Association and the Center for Economic Strategy, each year we run a foreign investor survey. So we ask foreign investors what is the biggest impediment for you to invest in the country. So the panel of these investors are both portfolio and strategic, those who already invested and who are kind of considering. And 6 years in a row, we have the one and the same number one impediment. This is a judicial system. Not even corruption. Like corruption was number one for 5 years. Last year, we had the number one is a judicial system and rule of law. That's a simple answer to your question, but it's a very difficult issue to solve.
Next, maybe worth bringing in David Rubenstein, since you are one of the big investors prowling the world looking for opportunities. What right now do you think about the Ukrainian economy in terms of whether it is an attractive place to invest or not? Are you concerned about property rights? Are you concerned about whether there's enough growth or not? How do you evaluate Ukraine compared to other countries in the region, David?
This is a question that a number of business people in the United States who met with your president when he was in Washington asked him as well. We wanted to invest more in Ukraine. Many people do, and many people have invested in Ukraine. We're at this meeting in Washington. I would say that right now, the investment environment around the world is relatively good, considering that COVID is still with us. As we all know, investment returns in Europe, Asia, and the United States have been relatively spectacular in most parts of the economy for the last year and a half or 2 years, despite COVID. However, because Ukraine has not participated in this growth at the same level that Western European countries have, or Europe or United States has, many people say, why should I invest in Ukraine, given the factors that we've all mentioned, which is slower growth, some of the judicial problems, corruption, and so forth. There was hope when your president became president that things would change a bit, but progress has been relatively slow. However, I would say that the Western world is really pulling for Ukraine, and there's no doubt that people in the United States would like to see Ukraine to be a more attractive place to invest, and I would like to find places to invest there myself personally, but it's been difficult to uncover the kind of opportunities we would really like. I do think that there is some progress that's being made, and I do think that there will be chances to make investments there when not everybody is looking for those investments. In other words, when everybody is looking for an investment, everybody agrees that it's great to grow, invest in a country, the prices go up. So I don't really want to tell everybody, come rush to Ukraine, because then the prices will go up. But my own view is that it is an attractive place to invest. You just have to have people on the ground. You have to have some patience. You have to recognize that this is a rare situation where you're investing in a country which has foreign forces in part of the country. That's very rare. It's very rare to find it to be a stable environment when you have foreign forces in part of your country. So on the whole, I would say there are opportunities in Ukraine. The Western world is looking for those opportunities. I think it may take a while to uncover some of them, but I'm hopeful that the prices will not get too high in the future, and there will be opportunities to buy things at relatively lower prices. Let me just end this by saying, Jillian, I'd be curious if you could ask everybody, and I could ask them myself, what would be the best reason you would give to somebody why they should invest in Ukraine now? If any of you were on an investment committee and asked to assess whether Ukraine is a good place to invest relative to other places in Western Europe, other places in mid-Asia, what would be the single best reason why somebody should invest in Ukraine? I'd be curious if anybody would come forward with that answer. The United States is supportive of what Ukraine is doing. A close relationship between the U.S. government and the Ukrainian government would be helpful. The IMF being as supportive as possible would be really good signs. But also, what people tend to do when they look for investments is they say, what smart investor is there? In other words, if you find really smart investors putting money in Ukraine, people will follow. And so it's not exactly dependent only on what governments are doing, but really smart people who know how to invest. If they were to put money in Ukraine today, tomorrow, or very soon, other people will follow. So I think a big effort has to be to meet with some of the leading investors in the world. People have a lot of money and are willing to put money outside the United States or outside of Western Europe. Those are the people that I think who will attract capital more than anybody from the government telling people to invest in the country.
Maybe I can ask you, Minister, why should anyone come to Ukraine right now? How would you sell Ukraine if you were basically on a roadshow doing a pitch to people like David?
I think that we can offer a lot to the world because we can offer something for the future and something for forever. because forever we are selling grain to the world. It's from ancient Greek times, so North Black Sea was a source of supply to food to Athens. And previous year actually illustrated this, that Ukraine actually showed itself as a stable food security guarantor for Southeast Asia. And we constantly grow in our supply of wheat, corn, and other cereals to Southeast Asia. So for the future, we are offering digital services, because digital services in our trade portfolio outperform energy, outperform the benefits from transit of gas. We are discussing so much these days, so we actually earn twice more from IT services than from transporting gas. And something for the past. Something for the past is steel industry, where actually Ukraine can be either partner of the developed world, US and the EU, in modernizing and creating climate-friendly steel, or we can be a raw supplier to China with its overcapacity in steel, because last year we increased supply of metal ore to China. And this is not a very pleasant choice for us, because we were squeezed from EU and US markets, and this is what we are discussing with them.
You're listening to Radio Ukraine's weekly program, Doing Business. The conversation focused on Ukraine's strong tech and STEM credentials, which have been growing on average by 30% each year over the last 10 years. According to the panelists, the best way for Ukraine to attract foreign capital quickly is to encourage entrepreneurial activity, which will lead tech-oriented investors to visit Ukraine. The final session of the day was a heated debate moderated by Julian Tat, US editor-at-large and chair of the editorial board, The Financial Times, on a new Cold War cannot save a warming planet, in which Fareed Zakaria and Niall Ferguson clashed wits. Today we are all trying to save the world, and yesterday we tried to save Ukraine. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, the Prime Minister of Sweden, summed up the panel discussions on the second day of YES Brainstorming. Carl Bildt closed the official part with a speech.
And now it's my great privilege to hand the microphone over to my old friend, Carl Bildt.
We started the morning with looking at the soft, the hybrid and the hard security challenges that Ukraine is facing and what more can be done. But I think it was unanimous conclusion of that breakfast session that whatever the challenges are, Ukraine is in a far better position now than was the case just some years ago. That is, of course, a rather positive conclusion. Then we started to dive into the real issues. And Nord Stream 2, I think there's a minor industry of people discussing Nord Stream 2. And those of us who follow the politics of Ukraine for somewhat longer period knows that issues of pipelines and gas prices, that's the bread and butter of the politics of Ukraine since decades, and Nord Stream 2 has added to that. Emotions were at display from different aspects of that particular debate. I would say two things only as observation on the debate. First, whatever happens with the pipes itself, lots of experts on that, European law and how that is applied, and that will be applied by the courts, is now central. Russia might have might, but Europe has right in the form of laws. And secondly, long term, the problem should be gone. Because the key task ahead of us is to get rid of this addiction to fossil fuel, call it oil or call it gas, that has been more or less pronounced in our respective economies and societies. And of course, the ex-Soviet space, by the way, is or has been extraordinarily addicted to fossil fuels. So the task ahead is a fairly major one. Then corruption. We try to sort that out with the Speaker of Parliament. The last question you had to him was whether it was going to be, whether it had been worse or better. And after a pause, he gave a fairly lengthy answer, the content of which was lost in translation, at least to me. Then, of course, the drama of the day. I don't know if that was inserted because of entertainment or because of substance. We all had to try to learn a complicated word, which I hope will not be an export product to the rest of the world. But in the debate about de-oligarchization, I think it was only proper respect for the social distancing rules that prevented that debate from having more kinetic expressions. Which way Ukraine will go? Anders was somewhat provocative, saying that it sounded like Putin's way. Others were advocating the Western way, which is the rule of law and equal rules for everyone and transparency and those particularly boring things. But the minister wanted to have a third way. Whether that is possible without descending into the third world standards is a question that I think will be very keenly watched by the outside world in the months and years ahead. Then finally, I think we ended on a somewhat more upbeat note. The rule of law issue, but there was a discussion whether the economy is not bad or really good. And whatever that is, but I think it's not bad. I talk with Swedish businessmen who've invested here now and then, every time I'm here, 3 or 4 of them, and they are on the positive side. They are hardworking people who have made fairly significant success here. Some problems, needless to say, but they give me a fairly optimistic impression. And I think the most interesting figure I take out of this particular session was that for all of the emotions that we have with the billions of gas transit, IT services more than twice gas transit. And that, I think, is something to keep in our back of our heads and give perspective to these particular debates. So, bumps, problems, challenging, but I think at the end of the day, it might, as a matter of fact, be the case that Ukraine is in the business of saving itself from itself and might, at some point in time, actually be a Silicon Maidan. Thanks.
The YES annual meeting have become an open platform to discuss and look for new ideas and views on paths to European, Ukrainian and global development. These meetings bring together over 350 politicians, diplomats, statesmen, journalists, analysts and business leaders from more than 50 countries. The dialogue on global challenges broadens the vision on the situation inside Ukraine and the prospects for the country's development in the modern world. It is also an incentive to find common ground between countries, common interests and values. Even though YES annual meetings have been held in Kyiv since 2014, Yalta remains a symbol of powerful diplomacy and dialogue. That was Radio Ukraine's weekly program Doing Business, hosted by Rodion Zhiznievsky and produced by Konstantin Lavrentyuk. Tune in every Wednesday for more.